approaching the Pigskin Parrot.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the Pigskin Parrot, where we are squawking football non-stop. Think back to some of the most iconic moments in college football history. The Appalachian State field goal block against Michigan, the Statue of Liberty play in the Fiesta Bowl, and the kick six. These iconic plays are what makes the sport so memorable. College football, like other sports, is an emotionally driven spectacle for the players, coaches, and fans. It's not too uncommon to see the emotions run a little too high for some, however. At least once a season, we're bound to see a couple of brawls. That's pretty common in rivalry games, but sometimes things can get a little out of hand, especially when coaches, fans, players, and things like that get involved. So without further ado, these are some of the most iconic heat-of-the-moment blunders in college football history. Starting off this list, we're going to go back to 1978 in the Gator Bowl, one thing that Ohio State fans know all too well, and it comes from a man known as Woody Hayes. Hayes was the head coach for the Buckeyes dating all the way back to 1951. The five-time national champion spent 28 of his years coaching in Columbus to a tremendous amount of success. He famously battled against Michigan's Bo Schembechler in the 10-year war from 1969 to 1978. This gridiron war likely could have extended past 10 years if it weren't for a little whoopsie done by Coach Hayes. Ohio State was set to play Clemson in the 1978 Gator Bowl. The Buckeyes managed to get 6 points in the fourth quarter of the game, cutting their deficit down to just 2. With just a little bit over 2 minutes on the clock, Ohio State had possession with hopes of a walk-off score. Disaster struck on a third down conversion attempt when Art Schlichter threw a pass up the middle that was picked off by Clemson's Charlie Bauman. Bauman attempted to return the ball back the other way before he was knocked out of bounds on the Ohio State sideline. What followed is one of the craziest things a football coach has ever done. Coach Hayes walked right up to Bauman and punched him right in the neck. Bauman's teammates quickly jumped in to defend him, which led to a massive bench-clearing brawl from both sidelines. Hayes in the middle of the scrum continued to try and fight and even put his hand in Bauman's face and started tugging at his helmet. After the fight died down, Clemson was able to run out the clock and win the game, while Woody Hayes was fired immediately the next morning. A 28-year-long coaching career gone in seconds. In 1954, Alabama was set to play Rice University in the Cotton Bowl. Now, this isn't the almighty Alabama team that we've come to know and love over the years. This was more of Alabama going through the original dark period where they were kind of struggling in the 1950s and really hoping to return back to the glory days from the 20s and 30s. National championship hopes were thrown out the window in favor of just praying for a winning season of any kind. Alabama had a stretch of mediocre seasons throughout the decade, the worst of these being in 1955 when they lost every single game on the schedule. Just 1 year before that disastrous season, however, the tone was set in the funniest way imaginable. The 1954 Cotton Bowl saw a 6-2-3 Alabama team take on the 8-2 Rice squad from the Southwest Conference. Alabama delivered the first blow of the game early on with a 6-0 lead before missing an extra point. That was the only blow that the Tide would deliver all day, however. Rice continued to pummel Alabama on the ground and the defense was blowing up the Tide's plans left and right. Midway through the second quarter, Alabama's running back Tommy Lewis decided that he was going to make the play of the game, but it wasn't on offense. Rice running back Dickie Mogul ripped off a huge run down the field. This was certainly going to be a touchdown as the young man had nothing but daylight ahead. Lewis decided that in this moment he was going to hop off the bench, run to the field, and tackle Mogul mid-play to stop the touchdown. Lewis then ran back to the Alabama sideline and pretended like it didn't even happen while he hid from officials. The referees were befuddled to say the least. See, Lewis thought that the play would have only resulted in a 5-yard penalty, effectively stopping the score. The referees, however, awarded Rice the 95-yard touchdown anyways by citing the Palpably Unfair Rule Act, which accounts for situations when a flagrant rule violation prevents a player from scoring by awarding the score anyways. Alabama went on to lose that game 28-6. The play itself remains an iconic yet hilarious part of bowl season lore. Our next entry on this list comes from a more recent time. In fact, I bet everybody remembers exactly where they were when Florida threw away their college football playoff hopes in 2020. 2020 was a weird season in general, given that there were no crowds, the schedules were shorter, and that Notre Dame actually joined a conference for once. All eyes were on the SEC, however, which featured some of the biggest players to come out of the draft. Amongst the group of top SEC teams was the Florida Gators, who were hoping to be in the national championship conversation for the first time since the Tebow days. Week after week, Florida was proving to be one of the dominant teams you didn't want to play against. The Gators were one game short, however, due to the Week 4 matchup between them and LSU being postponed because of the pandemic. The game was rescheduled to Week 10, and by that point, Florida had amassed a very impressive 8-1 record. The odds were surely in favor of Florida, especially against an LSU squad that had proved to be struggling without guys from the previous year like Joe Burrow. In even bigger news, Florida quarterback Kyle Trask was making a strong case for the Heisman Trophy and needed to show out in order to impress the voting committee late in the season. The big game finally took place at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. It was a solid back and forth for the entire game, even becoming a tie with just under 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Following the game-tying kick, Florida's defense came out to the field with hopes of making a huge stop so the offense could win with all 3 timeouts. The defense was actually successful in stopping LSU, forcing them into a punting situation on 4th down. Unfortunately for Florida, that progress was immediately undone. With the game potentially secured, Marco Wilson ripped his shoe off the foot of an LSU player and chucked it down the field in a moment of celebration. This led to a pretty hilarious call from the official who awarded LSU an automatic first down from the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. LSU's offense was then able to march down the field a little more and kick the game-winning field goal, effectively putting an end to Florida's national championship dreams. There might have been a sliver of hope that they could still make it in if they beat Alabama in the SEC championship, but they failed to do that as well. If Wilson had not thrown the shoe, Florida could have potentially made it to the college football playoff and had a chance at a national championship. A similar situation actually occurred 1 year earlier in a different SEC game. This time it was between Ole Miss and Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. The Egg Bowl, in my opinion, is one of the more underrated rivalries in college football. Sure, yeah, there's lots of brawls that happen every year with all of them, but the ones in the Egg Bowl always seem to deliver. The cutthroat attitude and the animosity between both schools is usually one of the highest, yet the least talked about amongst a lot of the Power 4 programs. Few match the intensity that these schools put on every time they take the field. One of the most memorable of these games took place in 2019. While they were no playoff contender, a rivalry win to secure a bowl bid would be a massive deal for any program. Mississippi State ran the table for a majority of this game, with the closest it had gotten being a tie game at halftime. The Bulldogs scored a touchdown late in the third quarter to give the home team some momentum to close out the game. With the music loud and the crowd bumping, Ole Miss finally scraped and clawed its way into the end zone with only 4 seconds left of regulation. The game looked like it was going to go into overtime. It was going to be one of the greatest Egg Bowls of all time. All Ole Miss had to do was sink in the PAT to tie it. Welp, here's the problem. After scoring the touchdown, Elijah Moore celebrated by squatting down in the end zone and pretending to pee like a dog. This celebration was a reference to former Ole Miss receiver DK Metcalf, who had done the same celebration in the Egg Bowl just 2 years earlier. The celebration resulted in a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that was set to be enforced on the PAT. Now kicking a 35-yard extra point, Luke Logan had to do some extra work to send the game into overtime. He was unable to do so as the kick was shanked to the right, causing Ole Miss to lose the game by a single point. And this, kids, is why it's always good to stay humble. Most fans of a college football team normally have that one game they think about when you mention a certain player or an iconic moment. For fans of California and Stanford, however, all I have to do is mention the two team names in the same sentence, and I bet you could guess exactly what play I'm about to talk about. The year was 1982. Cal and Stanford were set to play in the 85th annual Big Game. Stanford, led by quarterback John Elway, needed just one more win for bowl eligibility. The game got off to a slow start, but Cal eventually got a touchdown and a field goal to make it 10-0 at the half. Stanford answered back in the third quarter with 2 touchdowns. Cal answered with another touchdown, but failed a 2-point conversion attempt. Cal attempted to make up for it with a field goal later in the fourth quarter, making the score 19-14. Stanford then kicked a field goal to make it a 2-point game. Elway performed a hero drive that helped Stanford get it in field goal range. The Cardinal took the lead by a single point with just 4 seconds remaining on the clock. Cal's radio commentator Joe Starkey stated on the broadcast that only a miracle would help the Golden Bears win the game. A squib kick was done by Stanford in an attempt to kill the clock, and it was fielded by Kevin Moan, who then attempted to return the ball. After a series of hot potato football and desperate lateral plays, Cal eventually started making forward progress with the football. Marriott Ford was the last person to receive the ball, but before he could be stopped by any Stanford defenders, the Stanford marching band ran out onto the field thinking that the play had ended a couple of pitches ago. The band swarmed all throughout the playing area, disrupting the final play greatly. That didn't stop Ford, who continued to score the game-winning touchdown and pummel a trombone player with the football. The officials ruled the play as a touchdown, and it has since become one of the most iconic and controversial moments in the entire history of sports as we know it. What made this even better was the days following the famous incident when Stanford players delivered fake newspapers to California's campus stating that the results of the game had actually been reversed after a lengthy investigation by the NCAA. Cal students lashed out in anger and confusion, wanting to know how a game's outcome was decided several days after the event had ended. The school newspaper came complete with fake quotes, fake rulings, and even fake coupons for the school supply store, which made students even more mad when they went to present their 2-for-1 deals at the store that were not valid. The paper heist was so elaborate and hilarious that Brent Musburger even gave his kudos to the Stanford students on ESPN, and the papers have since become quite the collector's item for sports fans. This impromptu moment from that marching band, as well as the head bashing from Marriott Ford, leaves so many questions about this play in the air. Was a player's knee down? Should the band being on the field have resulted in a game-ending penalty? The history books say no, but fans still debate the debacle to this very day. If you've been following the channel, then this one's not going to be new for you. In fact, this was one of the first ever videos I ever did on the channel. With that being said, the next entry on this list comes from the 2006 matchup between Miami and Florida International. Miami has a pretty established reputation amongst the world of college football for being one of the more violent teams to play the sport. This was especially more prevalent in the late 90s and early 2000s. Miami once found themselves in one of the oddest predicaments ever, however, when they were set to play Florida International University. While big rivals normally reside within the same state, this one was a little bit different because the rivals had actually resided in the same city, which doesn't normally happen. I mean, these students frequently visited both campuses and went to each other's frat parties. So yeah, you could imagine that the animosity was a little higher for this one than they normally would be. Despite the schools being so close together, this was actually the first time that they had ever faced off on the gridiron. Players from both squads were pretty chirpy headed into the game, so the hype for the game was definitely there. The match kicked off and was seemingly normal for a rivalry game. What took place in the third quarter, however, is what this game is mostly remembered for. Miami scored a touchdown to make the game 13-0. After the extra point, FIU safety Chris Smith randomly got a hold of Miami's holder Matt Pirelli, and the first punch was officially thrown. This led to a domino effect that snowballed out of control very fast. See, it's normal for rivalry games to feature brawls between teams, but the brawl that ensued in the Orange Bowl that night was unlike anything we've ever seen in the history of football. Within seconds, both teams were entirely off the bench, beating the smithereens out of each other. Punches were thrown, kicks went straight into guys' teeth, a couple of helmets even came off and were being used as melee weapons. It didn't help that former Miami wide receiver Lamar Thomas was on the broadcast for the game encouraging the fight and inviting FIU players to, quote, meet outside and continue the fight after the game. Multiple players were arrested during the game, and 31 combined players from both teams were given massive suspensions. Thomas was fired from Comcast Sports, and head coach Larry Coker was fired from Miami at the end of the season. This has gone down to be one of the most iconic moments in college football, not because it's a big play or anything special like that, but because it just went on for so long. It was one of those things in college football where you just gotta sit there and review it for 20 minutes because you don't know what's happening. Police are getting involved, fans are now fighting in the crowd, people are getting suspended left and right. Do they stay on the field? Do they stay in the locker room? People had no idea. The police eventually showed up on their little motorbikes and started detaining people. It was insane. And of course, we can't forget the amount of blood that was everywhere after so many players got pummeled. It was one of the most shocking things to ever occur in college football, all because one heat of the moment chain started the entire brawl. One little anecdote I want to add about this game is that this was originally supposed to be an annual rivalry game called the City line series. This never ended up being the case though, because they only played the one game after this, which was a year later, not playing again until 2018. The reason I bring this up is because the 2007 game between Miami and FIU actually saw Mario Cristobal as the head coach for FIU during that game, the current head coach for Miami who has taken the team to a national championship. Just thought I'd slide that in there. Thank you all for watching another exciting episode of the Pigskin Parrot. I just want to let everyone know that we recently hit 1,300 subscribers, just a little under 700 away from 2,000. I'm so excited to see the growth of this channel and see how everything continues to get a move on as we continue success. I don't know if you've noticed, but I got me a nice little production budget now. We got some studio lighting. I got me the Roost, this awesome little fake studio that I'm now in. Everything's going good for the Pigskin Parrot, and I hope to see the channel continue. I've been thinking about doing a little bit of short form content as well to try and get some reach on other social media platforms, so I can't thank you enough for all your support. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what you want to see from the channel going forward. My name is Preston McElhaney. Thank you for watching.